Welcome to In Search Of. We're your hosts, Ashton
and Sam. We're two accountants who binge podcasts by day and TV by night.
Keep listening to find what you've been in search of. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Ashton.
What's up?
Not much, but it's a big day for the podcast.
It is. We released our first episode today. So
I'm glad you pulled the trigger because
I ripped the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
And I'm still just as nervous as we sit here.
But you're doing a good job promoting it.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying. But yeah, we haven't seen each other in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while. With the last time we recorded was Halloween, and now we're a couple days from Thanksgiving.
Oh my gosh. So it's been like a month, I guess. Okay. Well, good to be back. So today we've got Behind Her Eyes.
It's our TV show.
Yeah, that's our TV show. Then we have Who the Hell Is Hamish. And then we have You Seen This Man? Season 2 is the one I'll be talking about. So, okay, we'll start with the TV show. But if you don't want any spoilers, stop now because we're about to start the chit chat. So Behind Her Eyes, I loved it. It was so good.
And I was the complete opposite. I remember texting you, and because you had finished it before I did, and you were like, I can't wait till you get to the end. And then I got to the end and I was like, oh my God, I hated this.
Yeah, the ending, I think why I loved the ending is because I just did not expect that to be the ending at all. So I guess the premise is, I don't even know how that, it's a little like what would you call it? Like not sci-fi. Was that sci-fi? Yeah. Yeah, where it's like a potion or something they did to
I know they were like lucid dreaming, which I understand is a thing.
Okay.
But then they started projecting themselves into other people's bodies. And so it was like a Freaky Friday type situation, and he like projected himself into a girl's body, and then she projected herself into someone else's body, but it was actually him because he had projected himself first.
Yes, it was crazy.
Yeah, and it was based on a book, I think.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Is it one of Reese Witherspoon's?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. I just feel like anytime there's a TV show based on a book, it's hers.
It's her pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so, I mean, I liked it up until the end because it was sort of like a psychological drama, and it was like relationships. You could tell it was strained, and like something weird was going on, and something was gonna like happen at the end. And then what happened in the end was all this weird like body switching. I don't know. I think
I felt like so sad for the son when I was like, that poor kid doesn't even know that's that's not his mom. But the boy, the guy who takes over all the bodies, he was evil, evil. He just kept wiping everybody out.
Yeah. It was kind of creepy when they were in like the mental institution and they were in their like white things, and that's when I think they learned to lucid dream, I think.
Yeah.
Which I actually did in college. I did a informative speech on lucid dreaming.
Really?
Yeah, that was what I chose to do.
Wow, I didn't. I don't know that much about lucid dreaming, but I definitely loved the TV show. Just like kept me. I just had no idea what the heck was going on. So yeah, I really liked it. Sam was like, okay, what the heck was this?
I felt like it was so slow until the end, and then I didn't like the end.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what was the point? I was let down, but
yeah, but I think overall it was a good one. It was a good Netflix binge. And I feel like I can't talk too much about, I felt like only Murders in the Building I could talk more about, just because it was more like straight to the point. Like you said, this show was like all over the place, kind of slow, like you didn't really know what was happening, but I think from start to finish it wasn't bad.
I think it was. Ashton would recommend. I would not. So we have to give it a 5 out of 10 because I give it like a 0 and you give it a 10.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the ending, I didn't expect it, and you were like, what the heck? So yeah, all of these aren't always going to be 10 out of 10s. So we'll be honest.
We don't agree on everything.
No.
I mean, close.
We're pretty close. Yeah, we're pretty close. But yeah, so I say give it a shot. Sam says no.
Yeah, I think it's a waste of your time, but
I appreciate you still talking about it with me.
Yeah, it's fine. I think we agree on the podcast, though.
Yes, they're both really good podcasts. I'm gonna let you go first. This time.
I'll go first this time.
Okay.
So mine is Who the Hell is Hamish? And it was put out by The Australian, which is newspaper. So I really love their accents. Everybody has an Australian accent in this. And it was put out in 2019, and it's 10 episodes. So it's about Hamish McLaren, which he has like 10 different names by the end of the show. But in like the 1990s, he began just stealing and committing fraud, and he had like a dozen or so victims. It kind of like extended beyond like the direct people, and he probably ended up stealing like tens of millions of dollars. And the episodes kind of go through a couple of his like girlfriends and his ex-wife, and then they talk to just a couple of other victims. But what I found most interesting in the story was there's kind of like mini stories in between his big story and like how he affected like different people's lives. And the one story that I think a lot of people probably connected to, I guess, the most was, they call her Jane. So his wife, Beck Rosen, he married her in like 2000 something, and she had a son named Jack, and he was 15, and Jack had a girlfriend, and they call her Jane. That's not her real name, but just to protect her privacy, they called her Jane. And Hamish was married to Beck at the time, and he kind of started acting predatorial towards Jane. And like Beck would say that, you know, they would all be together, and Jane would be in like short shorts and like tank top or something, and just like hanging out, relaxing, very casual. And Hamish would like flick his towel like against her butt and stuff, and just like very like, she was 16 and he was like 50. Mm-hmm. And so just really inappropriate behavior. And Jane was like the star of her like high school class. Like, she was very smart, and Hamish told her that he could get her a scholarship for an internship at Princeton. And so, I mean, like if someone told me that I could get into Princeton, I'd be like, oh my God. And like, we live here. So like if someone in like Australia was like, you could get into Princeton in like the US, like I would be like, oh my God, yeah, I'll do whatever. So he took her on a trip. He like quote unquote chaperoned her to New York. And that kind of sparked this relationship. Not that Jane was really that interested in like a romantic relationship. I think she thought that he was going to like connect her to, you know, college and all this stuff. And so she just kind of went along with it because of that. But Hamish was like into it as like a romantic relationship. And meanwhile, Beck kind of knew all of this was going on, was getting bad vibes, and said to Hamish, like, if you leave with Jane on this trip, like, we're ending our relationship. And he left anyway. And he told Jane to lie to Beck, and he was going to lie to her. And he was like, you have to stick with the story. This is what you say whenever she asks about it. And Jane went along and she lied. And, Hamish called Jane's stepdad and asked if he could marry her. And Jane's stepdad was like, okay, well, first of all, she's like less than half your age, and second of all, like, you're married to Beck. No. And so that's how Beck realized, like, yeah, he actually is like trying to have a relationship with her. So anyway, they divorced, but Jane's grandparents also got involved with Hamish because he convinced them to invest with him, and just, he had like pyramid schemes of investing. So he would get people's money, and in order to provide like a fake return on their investment, he would have to have someone else invest. And like, that's just how they work, pyramid schemes. So he ended up, I don't think it was quite $1 million, but it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars that he ended up stealing from her grandparents. And when this story is first told, they, you know, say, Jane, you know, we reached out, but she doesn't want to speak to the podcast. And I mean, I understand that she was like really young and she probably doesn't know what to say and she feels bad. But a couple episodes later, they end up releasing a full interview with Jane, and she decides that she does want to speak. And it's like, it's one of the longer episodes, I think, the interview with her, and you just feel so bad. Like, you can tell how awful she feels, and just like how bad she feels about like getting her grandparents involved, and like none of the money has ever been returned back to any of these victims. They don't even know where it is. And so I don't know. I think it's just very touching to kind of hear from her, and you just feel so bad for her. And you were like, you were 16 and you were trying to go to college, like, and she blames herself, and you're like, no, like, don't blame yourself. You just want to like give her a hug. But anyway, he was sentenced in 2020, and they went through, like, they read off like every victim and how much he stole from them and what the sentence would have been for like each victim individually. And it would have added up to over 70 years. But I guess like the maximum sentence was, I don't know, it was like 60 years. So it was less, but still, I mean, he'll probably spend the rest of his life in jail. But it's just crazy how it can get that far, and like it can build up that much, because you think, like, how can someone do it over and over and over again? And like all of these people realized he wasn't who he said he was. And like he had told Beck that his father had like murdered his mother or something, and then he told another girlfriend that he was on an airplane with his parents and it crashed and his parents died, but he lived, and like his parents are both alive and well, they're living. And it's just like, it's crazy, the lies and how he made it as far as he did. But I mean, I think it's a really good podcast. I mean, I think I found it because I felt like I had listened to like everything there was, and then I was like, oh, well, there's other countries to branch out to.
Yeah, I'll go to what is Canada? They have like a CBC. Yeah, I'll like go venture out to the CBC, and then I think there's like 2 Australian ones. I've listened to that one, and then Teacher's Pet, where she was like, the wife was killed or whatever. Yes. I was almost, for a second, I almost got those stories confused. Mm-hmm. But then when you brought up the Jane, I remembered that, where it's like all these crazy stories of fraud and, you know, manipulation and like getting all these people to invest in him. And then there's like this side story of Jane. Yeah, I totally forgot about Jane, but it's funny that you mentioned the Australian accent, because that was like another, when I listen to podcasts, like the people hosting the podcast, like their voice is like a big like factor. Yeah. And I say that, and you and I have talked about how we hate our voices, so hopefully people will listen, even though our voices are not that cool. But yeah, and I say something about that in my review of my podcast. But yeah, like the Australian accent, it could have been like a horrible story, and I probably still would have like sat there and listened through all the episodes.
Yeah, and some of it was like over my head. They got into a little bit of like investment and like trading and like stock market stuff, and I was like, I don't remember this much from like econ in college, so I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. But that is why I really liked like kind of the personal stories that they put into it and how it really like affected people, and just beyond the money and the fraud and he wrote his name on a securities thing, and I was like, I don't know what that is.
Was there any like big differences between like how, because it's I feel like our stories are very similar. It's just like one is in Australia and one is in the US, and so I feel like you and I kind of know how things go down here in the US, but was there anything like big, like major differences with how they handled the crime he committed in Australia? No. Okay. I know sometimes there's like they handle things differently. Like I know in is it the UK where I don't know where it is, but they can hold you if they think you're what's the word I'm looking for? If they think you're like a suspect, they can hold you for so many hours, like I think 48 hours,
like
to
flight risk.
Yeah, like to get evidence. But if they don't get the evidence in 48 hours, they have to let you go. Yeah, which I think is interesting. But yeah, there's just always those little things where you're like, oh, but I didn't know if they handled it any different over there.
And I don't know, because this is it's less, it's not like a physical, like violent crime. And so I think it's a lot of like tracing bank accounts and like monies and signatures on things and stuff like that. So I think it's a little bit different in that way too. But yeah, I didn't notice. Yeah, no, that I really did like that podcast. It was, well, one, I couldn't get past the name Hamish. That might be a popular name in Australia, but no, he ended on the last name he had was Max Tavita. Okay. But I looked it up online. I won't read you all of his names, but there was, okay, maybe I will since I have it handy. He was born Hamish Watson. Okay, also, so that was his real name. Yeah. Also known as Hamish Earl McLaren, Hamish Philip McLaren, Hamish Philip Watson, Hamish Maxwell, and Max Tavita. I don't know where he got Max Tavita, because he was sticking with Hamish for a long time, and then he did a 180, but... Yeah, well, that was a good podcast. I enjoyed that. It's definitely interesting. It's a good one to like put on. You don't have to like listen to every single detail. I feel like, you can get the story, but and there's no violence. So I think today the podcasts we have are more like fraud based, and so there's really no. I don't have any violence. You don't have any violence. I would say behind our eyes there is a little bit of violence. Mm-hmm. Some arson. Yeah, but Sam doesn't recommend it, so you're good if you're not in the mood for that. But yeah, that was a good one. So okay, well, and I didn't even realize like how similar our stories are. I mean, when we first said that we were going to do these two, I thought, okay, they both like involve fraud, but after hearing you talk about that, I was like, oh, there's a lot of similarities from like the investing and non-violent but still like terrible things that were done. So my podcast is Have You Seen This Man? And it's season 2. There is a season 1, and I listened to it, but honestly I couldn't even really tell you what it was about. I don't remember. Did you listen to season 1? I did, and I think it was it the man who killed the girl at the laundromat? Was it like in the 80s or something like that? Yeah. Like back in the day? Yeah. I don't know. And then, because he went to jail and they went out on a community service type thing and he just bailed. He left. Yeah, he escaped. At a mall. He went to a mall. Yeah. Yes. Wow. Man, things were weird back then. I know. Can you imagine letting a convicted felon, like not even one for like drugs, like he like murdered a girl, and then he was brought to a mall and he just that was a pretty crazy story. Now I remember. Okay, so this is season 2. This season was released in August of 2021, so like pretty recent, and it's hosted by ABC News,
which it like surprises me all the time when I just see these like normal networks like have podcasts, but I mean, why not? Okay. So the host, I don't know. I've never like heard of these hosts, but their names are Matthew Mosk and Sunny Hostin, I believe. And, they have like the best voices ever. And I don't know if you thought that, but I just thought like I found the guy's voice like really not soothing, but just like such a great like I mean they work for ABC News, so I guess it makes sense. And then Sunny would like hop in every once in a while, and like her voice was amazing. So that's like always a big factor. Like I said earlier, is if they've got some good voices, I'm like super into it. But this is another story that kind of starts around the 90s. I feel like I keep choosing, like it was around like 1993. I keep choosing these like 1990s stories. I don't know why. But so it has to do with a guy named John Rufo. And as I was listening to the story, I was like just thinking about how, we listen to these true crime and these awful things, like these awful murders and how they take place. And like, there's stabbing involved. There's a shooting. I don't know, just like all the physical things that happen in a murder. And then this story, like there was no violence, but what he did, I just found it to be so like gut wrenching. And I'll talk about it more, but it just made me realize that like you can still do a lot of bad things, not with like physical harm. So John Rufo, he committed bank fraud. He stole like $350 million. And that was like in the 90s. So, I mean, I don't know what the difference is, but that's still a lot of money one way or another. And I'll kind of explain their scam because it's crazy how like easily they just did it and made it work. And kind of how, like you said, like, it's just amazing how people just buy into these things. And theirs was like actually like pretty legit. It was not like word of mouth. Like I guess Hamish was doing it, but John Rufo and a guy that he met who used to work for Philip Morris, which is like the cigarette company. So John Rufo had like his own company, I think, where he would like find or like lease computer equipment. And it's so funny when I think of that, I think of like lease schedules.
Amortization.
Yeah. I like go straight to my accounting brain. I'm like, where's my Excel spreadsheet and my lease schedule? So anyways, that's so boring. I can't believe I just said that. So John Rufo and Edward Reiner. So he met him through his company where he would lease Philip Morris like computers. Well, Edward got laid off from Philip Morris, and he came to Rufo and like had this idea to say they had this like top secret project where they would go to banks and say that they were going to do like smokeless cigarettes, which I thought was so funny because I'm like, don't we have those now?
Yeah, like vaping.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. I was like, were they onto something, or was that kind of always in the works? I don't know. But him and Reiner were going to go to banks and say they had these like secret projects, like it was top secret. You couldn't say anything. And I guess this was like kind of normal, like with Philip Morris, and they're not like the most popular company. And John Rufo was going to like provide the like computer equipment. And so in order to do this for this like secret project, they were going to need loans from the bank. And they called this secret project Project Star. So this was like, I think started in like 1992 or 93. And so they did all this crazy stuff. Like they, back then, I guess you just needed like a formal letter with like the letterhead. So they got a hold of like the Philip Morris letterhead, which like to me thinking now, like how we deal with our clients and how they get loans, I'm like, what? How, y'all just needed a piece of paper?
Yeah, like we could Google a picture and make like a Word document and be like, make a loan to me.
Yes, I know. And so they had the letterhead from Philip Morris. And then I think this is so funny. To get the like signature, they called the secretary and told her she won some like prize on a radio contest. And that's how they got their signature. And it almost makes you think like these guys... like what they did was not that crazy, but I guess they were just in a position of power to where they could get away with this. But like their plan was like pretty simple, but I don't know.
Yeah, it was like not very sophisticated. It almost sounds like a sitcom show.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so their first payment they got from one of the banks was $25 million, which is like a lot of money. And what I think was pretty smart though of like all of this, they weren't dummies. The money they would take, they would invest in the stock market. And so like they were still making their loan payments and all of that stuff. And yeah, they made a lot of money. And so Rufo was like super big into trading. And I say that now because I like want to mention it later, which I thought was just an interesting point someone made later. But in 1996, they got like tipped off, and Reiner and another coworker like who worked for Rufo, who pretended to be the secretary, which I don't even know why she went in on it. Like he was like, I need you to pretend to be somebody and go meet these bankers. And I'm like, oh, girlfriend, why would you ever agree to do something? But she like trusted him.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Why wouldn't you ask like, why? What am I doing?
It was crazy. So they go and meet up with these bankers. The bankers had tipped them off, like tipped the FBI off, and they were wired. Well, when Reiner and the coworker like walked out of the building, they were immediately arrested. So this is kind of where like everything was the downfall of Project Star. So Rufo was supposed to go to prison. Like, and there's so many things in the story where I'm just like, really, how? I don't know. Rufo was supposed to go to prison. He got sentenced to like 17 years, and they don't do this anymore, but they let him go, and they were like, you can come back and check in for your date for when you're supposed to go to prison. Yeah, I'm like, you guys let him go, but I don't know. They let him go. He goes to like check in, and he takes his ankle monitor off, and then he leaves. And I remember somebody like one of the U.S. Marshals or somebody was like, you just let the guy leave? And they don't do that anymore now. I heard somewhere where they said, you can't just like turn in your ankle monitor, and then there's more of like a actual process, obviously. So he leaves, and he's, I think, rented a car. He has like a bag packed, and he stops at the ATM, and that's like the last known image they have of him. And then he gets in his car, and they find the car at the airport. And so this was in 1998, and he hasn't been seen since, or as far as I know, he hasn't been seen since. And another crazy fact about this whole thing was, and this is kind of where like the gut wrenching of like how evil someone can be without physically being harmful, is he put up so like if he didn't come in, he put up his 6 homes for collateral, and they included like his mom's, his wife, like him and his wife's home, and his in-laws, and like some other people. So he didn't show up. So they took all those homes, and his niece speaks on the podcast, and she's like, yeah, it was just chaos. Like my grandparents were crying, like we were all like had nowhere to go, and it's just horrible. And like,
yeah,
to do that to your mom, your wife, your in-laws, like that. I mean, like his mom was like this little old lady, and she had like given him money to help. And I don't know, that to me was just, it's awful. Like to do that for your own freedom, to take away that kind of stuff from them. So yeah, he left a note, and it was a little vague. So like his wife got back home and saw this note, and they weren't sure. I think he tried to kind of make it look like he might have committed suicide, but a doctor he's like the chief psychologist of the U.S. Marshals, which I was like, damn, you're like pretty smart, like to be.
It's the psychologist of psychologists.
Yeah. So he was like, no, this guy's like too much of a narcissist to commit suicide. Like which I thought was such a good point, because he is like, everything he's done up to this point is like total like narcissistic things. And it just, the whole story is very odd. You know, he had no criminal record. He was married. He owned a business. But one thing that I wanted to say about the investing was that this guy, Rufo, like, someone said, you know, they feel like eventually he will be caught because he was so into investing that, like, they're like, watch the stock markets. Like, if you see somebody with a lot of money, like, he's all about the risk, like taking that risk, like sticking to your own habits, you know, like we all have habits. And so it was like, what are his habits? And they go through the episodes of like talking about these things, like, okay, you know, what are his habits? What was he into? There was a lot of talk about like him going to Italy. So they go and talk to like a barber, and they go talk to these different people. And it's so interesting to me that someone's been just missing off the face of the earth for that long. And there's really no evidence to point that like he's not alive. I mean, I guess there's the note, but the chief psychologist says like, no, this does not look like a suicide note.
Yeah, they said he didn't like apologize.
Yeah.
They usually...
Yeah, like there was a few points that he goes through, and it's so crazy to me that he's just been gone off the face of the earth for this long. But they said, you know, there was a lot of things, like this wasn't an impulsive decision, like he was doing this over a long period of time. But it's just so crazy that he left his wife and his mom, you know, like even his wife was like, I couldn't have left I would have gone with him. Now looking back, she's like, yeah, I would have gone with him, but I would have had to come back to my mom. So yeah, it's just an insane story, but there have been like, I guess sightings, like none that have been like that.
I thought the one at the baseball game was kind of interesting.
That's definitely like the most interesting.
But I was thinking, if you were on the run, you wouldn't plant yourself right behind where a television is going to be like fixed on your face.
Yeah. So they literally were watching like a Dodgers game in 2016, I think. And they saw this guy like right behind I don't know anything about
pitcher's
baseball.
mound.
Okay. Yeah. Pitcher's mound.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they like zoom in and I think it's him. And then they go on they have this literally an episode where they talk about trying to find who has that ticket. And apparently that's a lot harder than I thought it was, because one, those tickets are super expensive, but it was like these people who, you know, got the ticket, but then would give it to someone else and give it, you know.
And like companies bought tickets and gave them to people, and they got transferred, who transferred.
Yes. And so I still don't think they know who had that seat. But I like this story because it's so recent too. Like, yeah, it happened in the 90s, but they're still looking for him today. They had the sighting, you know, they don't know if it was him, but in 2016. So
you think like maybe I could find him?
Yeah, I'm out there looking for you, Rufo. And I love their descriptions of him because, you know, you and I both worked like in a corporate setting where you have the IT guy who like comes and helps you with your computer. And I could just so imagine that guy. Yeah, it just was so easy for me to imagine this person, but for him to do what he did and how he's still missing, it just baffles me.
Yeah. I always think missing in the sense that like they've made themselves missing on purpose is wild to me, because the amount of people that you had to have seen in the process of going missing and like wherever you are, it's just, I can't like imagine it.
Yeah. And maybe we hear of like more unsuccessful stories of people, because if you're missing, they don't have anything to say. But yeah, I feel like I hear the unsuccessful stories more often, and that is because if you're found, they're going to talk about it. But yeah, this is a story where there's not like an ending, but it was still, I think, was a really good podcast to listen to. It's 6 episodes, so it's pretty easy to get into, and the ending is definitely open ending because they don't know where he is. But yeah, I thought it was a really interesting story.
I would recommend.
Okay. So that's our podcast. Yeah, I liked those a lot. I liked how they were so similar, but then yet, happened in two different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. And had one guy, was like in everybody's faces and caught and is spending the rest of his life in jail. And the other one was like sneaky and sly and still hasn't been found.
On the run.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So now we're going to do, I guess, products.
Yeah. So mine is not a product.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But it's kind of still on the theme of our general podcast. I watched the other day, which I don't usually watch, like 2020 or Dateline, like I have occasionally. But I watched on Friday, they had the Turpin sisters. And this was in 2000. It was 4 years ago when the story really broke. So these two girls that were interviewed with Diane Sawyer on this episode were two of 13 children who were abused and not neglected, but abused by their parents. They lived in California at the time, and the oldest girl was on the show, and then her 17-year-old sister at the time. So they're currently 29 and 21. But 4 years ago, the 17-year-old girl crawled out the window at like 5:40 in the morning of her parents' house, and these kids they were not in the public. Like they had almost never been outside. They did not go to school.
I think I know the story.
Yes.
Crawling out the window. I think, okay.
Yes.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And so she's like wandering down the street in the middle of the road because she doesn't know that you're supposed to walk on the sidewalk because they don't go outside of their home. And she has taken her brother's cell phone and she calls 911, and the operator answers and she's like, "Hi, I just ran away from home because I'm trying to like help me and my siblings." And so the operator is like asking the typical questions, and one of the things she says is, "Are you taking any medication?" And the girl's like, "What's medication?" And she's 17. And she said, like when you're sick, do you take anything? And she said, "Oh, well, I mean, sometimes we take Robitussin if we have a cold, but no, I'm not." And so the operator says, "Okay, well, I'm going to get a deputy out there." And they talked to the deputy a little bit, and it was the end of his shift, and he gets, runaway calls a lot. And he's like, it's typically we just pick up the kid and bring them back home and explain to the parents like they were trying to run away. And that's that. But he sees this girl, and he says that she does not look 17. She looks much younger. She's very thin, and her speech she talks in a weird cadence, and he asks her if she has injuries, and she says, "What's injuries? Like, are you hurt?" And she says, "No, I'm not hurt, but my two sisters, they're chained up right now." And he was like, "Chained up? Why are they chained up?" And he said, "Well, because they stole from mommy." But really they only stole because they were hungry. And he said, "Do you have evidence of this?" And she said, yes, I do. And she had taken pictures on the cell phone because her older sister told her to, that like you would need proof to show someone if you get out. So he puts her in his car and he calls for backup. And like an hour and a half later, they drive to the girl's house and they break in. And I mean, the place was an absolute disaster, and the parents blamed it on, they were moving to Oklahoma, I think, the next day. And the parents say that that's why their place is a mess. But I mean, like, the kids had not been bathed in years. They spent most of their days like chained their ankles and their wrists to their beds. They were fed like a slice of bread and peanut butter like a day, but at the same time had to serve their parents like actual meals. And the police said that if they had moved, some of the kids probably would have died in the process. So they take all the kids into custody, and so the girls are now 4 years later speaking out and like telling the story. And I mean, it's really sad because even with like donations and funds and stuff, a lot of the kids are living in like crime-ridden neighborhoods and are still not doing well. But it was interesting. And the reason why the girl wanted to leave was because she saw Justin Bieber videos and on her brother's cell phone. And I don't know if it was music videos or like interviews with him, but she was like, wow, there's a life out there and people are happy and people are nice and you can have fun. And so it was like he inspired her, and I was like, you should like donate to them because they really need it. But it was a really heartbreaking story, but really interesting. And it's crazy to think that there are people like living like that you literally don't know because you've never met them. But there was a boy who was so the oldest girl went to school until 3rd grade, but then people started noticing like she was probably being abused, neglected. So they pulled her out of school, and then none of the rest of the kids ever went. But after the story broke, a classmate of that girl wrote like a really long Instagram post, and he was like, I feel so guilty and so ashamed because she was the girl that no one wanted to talk to, and she smelled and people made fun of her. And he was like, be nice to the Jennifers of the world because you don't know what's going on. And if you can get them to talk to you, like you could be saving their life. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember that story. I didn't realize there was a 2020 where the kids are talking on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the girl who climbed out the window and then her oldest sister who encouraged her to do it. So those two.
Yeah, that kid made a good point. Like, you never know like what people are going through. So always be nice.
Yeah.
I liked that. That's a good recommendation.
It is. Yeah. And I'm sure there's podcasts or other specials on the story, but
Well, mine is not, mine's a little more vain. It's not.
It's practical.
Yeah. So we, just today we released our first podcast. And so I, had used, I guess, I keep wanting to say Audio Chuck, but that's a podcast. Yeah, that's a podcast network. This is Anchor, is an app, I guess a website too, where you can upload your podcast, and they make it so easy. Like, I don't know anything about any of this stuff. I'm just talking into a mic, and we plug some things in and somehow get it to work.
Call your husband.
Yeah, FaceTime Jake every single time. But Anchor has made it like super easy to upload the podcast. So sponsor us, Anchor, and get us an advertisement.
Yeah, free promotion.
Yeah. So I really liked that. And that was super easy to use. So if you're thinking about doing a podcast, it's not as scary. Honestly, the scariest part is speaking into a mic when you're being recorded. I don't know why, but literally Sam and I can sit here and talk. And then as soon as I hit the little red button, we get so nervous. I don't know why. So yeah, Anchor has made that very easy. And then another thing I used today was, I think it's called like Wave Podcast. So it's like WAVVE, and they make it where you can create a little like Instagram post and have an image. So say like you want to show your podcast picture, your name of your podcast, and maybe the title of the episode, and then like a little blurb of like sneak peek or sneak preview of like your episode. That I never thought I would be able to do something like that, but they make it so easy. Like, I feel like there's these websites now where you can just like pop, and like Anchor's free, this Wave is free, like it's just, yeah. So if you're interested at all in putting together a podcast, these are some websites that we've used that I've really liked.
Yeah, and it's like not like a static post, and like there's sound, and like you can kind of get previews, so when other people are like scrolling, it like prompts them to kind of spend a second like looking at it or listening. So so that's my I guess product recommendation. But and then we don't, well, okay, I do have something for the good, because I got one recommendation when we did our post. Did you get responses? No, I did get someone who promised at a future date to give one. She said, I don't have one off the top of my head, but I will give you one.
We're so cool. We put up Instagram and don't get any responses.
And a single person gave us something.
Look, and it's my sister-in-law, so yeah, it's not even like
obligation.
Yeah, but so my sister-in-law, she's gonna be so happy that I did this, but she works at ULL, which is a college in Lafayette, Louisiana. So have you heard of Lafayette?
Yes.
Oh, wow, you have. Okay. So Lafayette is like an hour from Baton Rouge. And she is the program director there for their life program. And so what they do is kids with special needs, they have a college program. And so they go from high school into college and they learn life skills and they do all sorts of things. And it's such an incredible, like they live in the dorm on campus. And so I think it's just a great opportunity. I think that's so cool that they're starting to do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm just plugging her UL Life program. So if you are needing somewhere to donate and you're just wanting to do something good, that's a great, great program. If you know of anyone who's looking for something like that, Lafayette is a really cool city, and and she's the director of it. So
nice,
10 out of 10 for UL Life program. But yeah, so that's my something good. And again, in the future, if you have something good that you want to send to us, we'll talk about it. And maybe we'll get more.
Yeah. My good thing is that this week is a 2-day week for us.
Oh, thank God.
So it's probably not Thanksgiving when you're listening to this.
No.
But it is a couple days away for us, and we are very much appreciative. We're thankful for a 2-day week, work week.
Yeah, we are very thankful for that. Okay, well, I think that's it. You have anything else?
Nope. Until next time.
All right. Bye, Sam.
Bye, Ashton.